and welcome everyone. So as I mentioned earlier, today's webinar is about incorporating safety and transportation impact assessment guidelines. We'll be hearing from Russ Watts from the city of Red Deer, Alberta. We're bringing best practices from across the country to the National Capital Region. But first, I do have a few announcements. I would like to introduce the 2023 IT Canada National Capital Section Executive. My name is Sean Smith, and I am this year's president. We also have some others on the lines: Ninoy, Jordan, Wayne, Patrick, John, and Gordon make up the executive. So feel free to turn on your cameras and give everyone a wave. We've got lots of great ideas in store for this year, and forward to working with this great team to deliver them to you. Thanks, guys. All right, I will also want to give a shout out to our sponsors. We have 10 sponsors, and their financial contributions go a long way in helping our IT Canada NCS chapter provide quality events that help local professional development. So thank you, sponsors. There is a Spring IT virtual conference happening March 14th and 15th, and this brings together IT from across North America for 2 great days of showcasing the importance of planners and engineers working collaboratively and providing real-world examples of their success. All sessions are being recorded so that registrants can participate in real time or on demand. There's also the IT Canada annual conference, which is happening in Winnipeg this year, June 4th to 7th. So hundreds of road safety and transportation professionals and students will gather in person to exchange ideas. This event brings together 2 respected transportation organizations, the Canadian Association of Road Safety Professionals and IT Canada, for a unique opportunity to make new connections and share ideas. Award nominations are being taken until March 1st. So each year, IT Canada sponsors an awards program to honor outstanding achievements in the transportation profession, technical excellence, and service to ITE Canada. There's also, I wanted to let you know that IT Canada is offering free membership for 2023 to transportation planning professionals who have not been a member of ITE in the past. So if they find value and want to stay, their second year is at half price. Do you know any planners? I didn't know you. Yeah, tell them to join us here at ITE. One more announcement here. There is some online training that you might be interested in, road safety for Canadian practitioners. This is brought to you jointly between TAC and ITE. And there's a comprehensive self-paced training program with 5 modular courses. So check that out if you're interested. Now on to our keynote presentation for today by Russ Watts. Russ works with the city of Red Deer as a transportation and development engineer. Prior to this, Russ worked with Alberta Transportation in various roles related to highway operations, planning, and management. His work experience spans over 25 years and includes a variety of transportation, traffic, municipal, and provincial projects. Russ has a diploma from Red River Community College in Winnipeg. He is a professional licensee with APEGA and professional technologist with ASET. His topic today is incorporating safety and transportation impact assessment guidelines. Over to you, Russ.
Thank you very much. Hopefully this isn't a portent of things to come, but thank you very much, guys, for having me today. Appreciate your patience as well. So as Sean mentioned, my name is Russ. Work with the city of Red Deer. Just for context, Red Deer is a city of about 100,000 people, and we are smack dab in the middle of Edmonton and Calgary on the QE2. And today we're going to talk about incorporating safety into our TIA guidelines. This presentation has kind of morphed a little bit as well. And so what we'll talk about is just some of the background. We also are in the process of updating our engineering design guidelines as a whole. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other safety principles that we're including into the updated version of the design guide. So yeah. So why did we do this? Our TAA guidelines, our last version of the design guide was published in 2020. Since that time at the city, we've gone through, some fairly significant changes, largely as a result of COVID, organizationally, and we've really changed our view of how we look at TIAs with respect to supporting development, and also just recognizing that for the most part, we really had a lack of consideration for incorporating a safety review at intersections, either with regards to new development, to infill development, or just any kind of transportation related reviews. Our current guideline focus, I don't think it's much of a surprise. It's very focused on traffic and capacity, and most of our improvements focus on how we address those issues. There's very little consideration for safety when we consider developments. A lot of this, we know when we don't incorporate safety, it can lead to either delays, or we get surprises later on, either post implementation where things were missed and modifications are required that can increase costs. It can also increase the delays on the development. Our current process, typically we look at when we would ask for a TIA is usually when 100 or more trips are generated in any peak hour. And it's interesting, in a lot of cases, what we find, in some cases with certain developments, that's not a really hard threshold to trigger. But especially in some of our older areas or previously established areas, we really have challenges with actionable outcomes. And I've got a couple examples later on that will kind of illustrate that issue that we encountered. And in a lot of cases as well, something like road widening might not be possible. So it becomes very challenging when dealing with individual one-off developers who may trigger the requirement, but could have a very small percentage of, contributing to the need for that overall development. This is kind of an accurate description of how our process works right now. Currently in the old design guide, what we would ask for from the developer's consultant would be a scope. We would review the scope. Sometimes there'd be a bit of back and forth on the scope. Once we agree to the scope, the consultant goes off, does their work, and then of course we would have quite a bit of back and forth as far as the content, the assumptions, even the outputs of the report. It can be quite timely, and ultimately with our development permit process, if it's a condition of the permit, it can delay that permit application. And one of the things that we're really challenged with in the city today is just that development. Over the last couple of years, it was fairly good in 2020, 2021. Last year is really slow, and we're seeing things really slow now. And we're really trying to promote the concept of being developer friendly, and trying to streamline process as much as we can, and remove any kind of barriers to development. Our current guidelines are, as you can see by the graph, very capacity focused, and we don't really mention much about safety at all. And we're still looking at these pretty traditional methods of judging capacity with the VC ratios, LOS, and Q percentile. So over the last couple of years as well, we've added some additional medium scale guiding documents to our repertoire, if you will. And part of what our update is going to do is incorporate some of these other documents into the guidelines and into the philosophy. Probably the biggest one for us is our multimodal transportation plan. This was done 2018, 2019. And what it did was identified 4 key components. Vehicular, of course, quite some time before we ever get away from that. It looked at transit, it looked at recreational trail use, and it looked at active transportation. So we've been gradually trying to incorporate the concepts in the multimodal transportation plan into our long-term transportation planning process, but also in our development reviews and subsequently the traffic impact assessment guidelines. We've made modifications. The middle graphic there, we've made some modifications to our neighborhood design standards as well. This is kind of the area structure plan stage of development, and again, it's looking at trying to increase walkability, access to transit, and more of a pedestrian scale friendly type of environment that doesn't necessarily focus everything on the vehicle. So this is kind of where we're at. Again, document on the left is these neighborhood planning design standards are a recent document, and some of those things have been incorporated into the 2020 edition of our design guide. Others haven't, and of course, we also rely on various types of reports, functional planning studies, impact assessments, servicing studies like that to help guide us when we review these individual developments. So as I said, the goals for the updated TIA guidelines were to help become more in line with some of our core values, and for us in engineering right now, it's really that focus on being development friendly, but also looking at transportation for all users. So again, incorporating more multimodal options in the developments that we see. We also wanted to beef up our safety reviews, and then third one was the again, the multimodal, the alternative forms of transportation for Red Deer. Red Deer is an interesting city in that regard. We're a 15-20 minute city. It's very easy to drive anywhere, within 15 and 20 minutes. So it's a challenge to convince people to use the alternative, the active, the cycling and walking, and e-scooters are now big here in the summertime, but it's a challenge to get people out of their cars. So how are we going to implement these core values with being development friendly and incorporating transportation for all users? One of the things we did in the past was we had that trigger, the 100 trips a day in the peak, and we would apply that across the board. So regardless of your development, whether it was a quarter section development or something smaller with requiring a new intersection, or these infill developments where a change of use was required, we would automatically go to requiring the developer to do the impact assessment. What we started to notice in some of these cases was we were getting very little value in the sense that they kind of told us what we already knew, especially in some of these infill developments. So what we're moving towards on the redevelopment, what we would consider the brownfield developments, is more of a review by the city, and so we've moved to doing more levels of review. In some cases, it's quite simple, very high level, based on change in use trip generation to decide whether we would need to do any form of improvement. In some cases, we would do a full-on TIA all by ourselves. And in many cases, and as is one of the examples I have later, we would just simply ask for the developer to provide us with some information to be able to do that. In the new, say a greenfield, we'll still likely follow the, we'll still require it, but it'd probably be a case by case basis, just depending on the scale and the magnitude. Up until recently, I have a very small transportation group. One engineer was involved in design review. The other was predominantly TIA planning, modeling, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, we are experiencing some shortage and vacancy right now. So that's kind of limiting our ability to be able to implement this. But again, this is we'll talk about a little bit later. Updated guidelines, again, same thing. We looked at areas where we could improve some things, cut out some of the process. So what we have here is we have in our old process, we had development officer wanted to be the primary point of contact, and we've essentially removed that. We've and so it's allowed us to cut out some steps. We think we can get our timelines. You can see kind of on the right here, shave some time off there just kind of by removing that back and forth with the that middle step. And then the other thing, again, we're looking at, we think more multimodal to be able to, again, try to incorporate more of that active use and transit use into the development. And it can be as simple, in some cases, we're getting more prescriptive on the amount of bike racks we would provide in an infill development, or some developments we ask developers to upgrade transit stops to make them a little bit more enticing for people. And trail connections, that kind of thing. How can we reduce some of the vehicular demand at these intersections or at these development locations and try to encourage more people to get there in a different manner. The safety reviews are very interesting, and it speaks again to what we're trying to do with the a more focused review of traffic impact assessments. And so where we mentioned before, in a lot of these cases, we look at infill development, we see intersections with lots of capacity to spare, but they may not be ideal from the intersection configuration perspective, or perhaps there's some issues related to pedestrian movement and that kind of a thing. And so one of the proposed changes that we have is this document from FHWA, which is including some of the safety analysis in these developments, and that would either be greenfield or brownfield development. Basically, the review entails a review of crash data, It looks at operational analysis. We are, and I'll touch on this a little bit in the next steps, but we'll look to developing some of those base case intersections and work on some of the predictive analysis that's in the document. And so from that, we're able to look at potential safety issues that may be caused, look at the potential modifications that can be done, and apply some kind of cost benefit analysis to see if that's applicable or if it's going to be of value at that time. And it's really trying to, again, focus the issue that we might have that's caused by this particular development. And, you know, if it's not capacity related, are we going to see the potential for an increase in operational issues or safety issues? And can that be addressed at the early stage? To do that, the city, we maintain we have very good collision data we get from the province. And so we're able to look at some of the major intersections in the city, determine where we see issues and where those potential problems could exist. This, you know, is going to involve on some of our in-house work, some collection of data, some safety reviews, and just a little bit of you know, additional work on our end. But again, we're looking to see if there's a potential to exist at some of these locations, either currently or, you know, based on the potential increase in traffic movements based on the development. So these are some of the other, they're not necessarily related to traffic impact assessments per se, but it's more of you know, safety improvements in the design guide itself. And this is just moving to what some jurisdictions would refer to as a roundabout first model. So whenever we have consideration for multi-way stop control, we're going to consider the roundabout in lieu of traffic signals. And you can see the numbers. I think everybody's familiar with some of the benefits of roundabouts. Roundabouts in Red Deer and surrounding area in central Alberta are becoming much more prevalent, and so people are becoming much more familiar with them, especially in our rural areas and some of the surrounding areas of the city. We're seeing our Red Deer County, adjacent municipality, and Alberta Transportation installing a lot of these at a lot of intersections, especially in the rural areas. We see huge benefit in the collision reduction, especially the fatal collision reductions. So as they become more popular, more familiar, you know, I think people will be less afraid of roundabouts. This is just some examples of, we have two major multi-lane roundabouts on 67th Street in Red Deer. 67th Street is one of our major arterial roadways. It connects two provincial highways east and west of the city. It's an over-dimensional load corridor. You know, you can just see we've had some very good, seen some increases in our property damage, but you know, the injury, collisions, and the vehicle delays have had a significant impact. One of the other changes in our TIA guidelines are the intersection functional plans. And one of the things we had done before is we had made a requirement of you know, an overview of a simplified functional plan of improvements. Now, what we were finding in a lot of cases was, depending on the timeline of the improvement, we never saw them to implementation. And so what we really want to do, we kind of want to lessen the burden. We want to lessen the you know, the time and the cost for developers. So really what we're looking for changing here is identifying feasibility, identifying the constraints, and you know, essentially we look at what could be required and identify that required right away. Unless there's going to be some type of improvement required within our horizon, we use a 10-year horizon. We're really looking for a simplified type of information. The other thing we're changing is cost estimates. We've required a cost estimate in the past, and the same thing. It's very outdated by the time you get there. It's high level. It's really not reflective of the reality by the time this ever gets to implementation. So we're just going to simplify those processes as well. And again, this is kind of on a case-by-case basis. We may, if we look at something and we think there's value in doing this, then we would do it. But for the most part, we're really trying to simplify this for consultants. So now I'm going to go through just a couple of the examples that will help, hopefully help illustrate the thought process, how we kind of got to where we got to. And so this, hopefully you guys can see this. This is a development we had in North Red Deer, and the before picture on the top that you see is a old car dealership. The after picture below was a redevelopment, and we have a gas bar, convenience store. There's a Popeyes, Subway, and car wash in the bottom left, and I think some commercial rental units. The picture you see on the right is a plan we did back in 2005, and it looked at a bunch of improvements to Gates Avenue. Gates Avenue is our major north-south corridor. It used to be Highway 2A through the city of Red Deer, and it supports, it's predominantly commercial, and it has an older system of service roads. And so this plan in 2005 looked at what kind of capacity improvements Gates Avenue would need moving into the future, but it also addressed the what do we do with these service roads, just their proximity to some of these major intersections. So in this Trader Ridge development, there was it was a fairly intensive change in use. And so when we looked at the numbers, we initially had asked, or we required the developer to do a traffic impact assessment. So they looked at 3 intersections, and hopefully you guys can see my cursor, but the intersection on the right, bottom right of the picture is Gates Avenue and 74th Street. So it's a arterial to collector intersection, fairly major intersection. The other intersection, and so then we have this service road right here, very close proximity. So we asked them to look at the capacity of this intersection, and then there was also another intersection, I think a little bit further to the, actually, no, we asked them to look at the future intersection right here. And what they came back with was very high level of services at this intersection and pretty good level of service here. So it kind of confirmed what we knew in our gut. We weren't aware of any problems here. We knew that this intersection had a lot of capacity. But what we were really curious to see was the impact of this development, all this additional traffic on the service road intersection, because historically we know, and the reason why we're doing this is to provide more separation. There's difficulty crossing from north to south in this case. We wanted to see what, if any, operational issues existed there. So we kind of had a little request where they looked at existing collision data. There was not a lot. There was a couple. Level of service wasn't terrible, and so this TIA kind of got us thinking, where we went through a lot of effort, and at the end of the day, there wasn't any really actionable things that we can do. We weren't in a position to be able to implement this future version because we needed to close this service road to the south. We needed to get these landowners on board. And then we had no capital budget in order to do this. So, you know, really what we required of the developer was to provide their building setback. And so you can kind of see this area here is unencumbered. We made sure that there was nothing of any kind of permanency within this area. So at some stage in the future, we could implement this. You know, again, it got us to thinking that, you know, if I had to do this one again, I think we would have done an internal analysis ourselves, determined the capacity here, and looked at this existing condition, and we would have gotten to the same place. The other example is again another intersection down on Gates Avenue. Our up in the top right corner of the before picture is one of our shopping malls in Red Deer. This was an old. Oh, sorry guys, I think I have these backwards. And the before is down here. This is an old vet clinic, and it had a kind of a weird direct access right in here, right at the service road. This intersection, for the most part, had good capacity issues. This movement was terrible. It had a level of service of F. You know, we looked at this one after the Trader Ridge, and we asked ourselves, well, if you look at the future plan here, it had a series of roads to the rear and a road running right through the property, and really not something that this one point developer, so this is the up here, there's a Starbucks in here and a burger joint in here, just absolutely off the table to be able to ask these guys to implement this. And again, there was lots of other landowners that would have been involved in that. And so really what we asked for was for these guys to do a traffic count. We did an analysis. We came up with a level of service issue here. We did get them to move their approach here. So this is all closed
Russ,
off.
sorry, just to interrupt. We are not able to see your cursor, so you just have to describe it.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Sorry
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So if you look at the picture on the top, I've labeled the before, but it's actually the after. And so in the after picture below, if you look at the where the service road on the west side, on the left side of the picture, where it meets with the old vet clinic, there was an approach right at that intersection on the north side. And so we did our internal analysis of that, and you know, it wasn't rocket science to determine that, you know, there would be a benefit from removing that. So we did. We got them to remove that, and in the picture above, you can see the new development orientated that way and closed off. But this was one where we really had, you know, if there's operational issues there today, it would have been very challenging for us to, you know, again, put those to that point developer. So we looked at how do we make operational improvements to the intersection. We decided to live with the capacity issues on that south service road, you know, in favor of that development, recognizing, you know, that it was not causing any serious collision issues or the potential to. And so again, this was kind of, it was an evolution in the thinking to, you know, look at these things this way and come to a place where we modified our thinking on the traffic impact assessment requirement. So are we there yet? So our design guide, we're looking to publish in March of this year. We look at it annually. We have a number of other things to do in getting prepared for that. So that's kind of our next step and the urgent requirement right now. I did this presentation at the TAC conference in Edmonton, and it had a really great question about, how are we going to come up with those predictive models and things like that. And one of the things we are planning on doing this year is an update to our overall citywide transportation model that was last done in 2016. And so my intent there is to include the development of the safety predictions and baselines within that transportation model update. And so, much like the model itself, as far as looking at different things throughout the city, my hope is to include that safety element in there as well, and so that we can start looking at things in that regard on a case-by-case basis. And then, just the overall philosophy, as I said, we've been gradually evolving and changing how we view the TIAs with respect to development. Unfortunately, we really haven't had any kind of major development since we started this to be able to test this. As I said, most of our development in the city is very slow. We have very little larger scale quarter section development, and only one or two infill developments that have any kind of significant impact. And yeah, that's me. So I guess we can open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Russ. Not seeing any questions in the chat yet. Feel free to add them in. I do have a couple that I'd like to start off with. First of all, what prompted the city to include safety reviews in the TIA?
Yeah, like I said, I think it was a piece that was missing, and in trying to look at things in a more targeted fashion, we wanted to. It's kind of like trying to figure out the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And when we looked at, we had, capacity, we had it fairly well covered, but when we're looking at things specifically to see what other issues, we found that there was a pretty big gap in our requirements and our process by not including some kind of safety or operational review.
Right. And so adding the safety reviews to the TIA will increase the scope. Do you anticipate any pushback from the development community, consultants, the additional time and cost? And are you planning to do any consultation or engagement with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's always forefront in the mind. So we're hoping that it's going to offset itself and balance itself and come out on the good end. So in a lot of cases, we've removed the upfront initial cost when we look at the TIAs in-house. We recognize that when we do require that there will be some additional cost or some additional time, but we're trying to balance that as well with a more streamlined review process. And so, yeah, overall, I think, if you were to look at 10 TIAs done in a year, there may be an increase on 2 cost-wise, scope-wise, but the other 8 should more than cover the balance.
Right. You mentioned a mobility playbook in one of your earlier slides is something that's the city's done. Can you elaborate on what that is?
Yeah, the mobility playbook's a little bit of an older document, and it kind of morphed itself into the multimodal transportation plan. But it's really just it's a guiding document to help us look at different modes, look at providing connections to transit. We have a great, absolutely fantastic trail system in Red Deer, recreational trail use. And how do we look at incorporating that into a commuter trail network, or how can we provide how do we provide that option for people to get out of their cars and use something a little bit more mobile. And then it also helps to provide, like guidance for us when we're reviewing the development and look at, is it accessible for pedestrians? Does it have bike racks? Is there a good trail connection? Stuff like that.
Okay, we have a couple of questions in the chat here. First one from Ryan. Does the city make the collision data it has access to readily available for consultants to use in the TIA analysis?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. And next question from Andrew. What type of data do you provide to consultants? Is it synchro models, Excel files, and easily workable formats, or just PDFs and left to the individual consultants to format? Also, is there a cost to this data?
So we provide, in some cases, depending on the review, we'll actually provide the VISM model. And our traffic count, usually we provide traffic count information, and the consultants are typically running the synchro models. I don't think there's a cost to any of that. The one area where we're a little bit cautious, shall I say, is with the signal timing plans. Those we tend to we're kind of working on this internally. We provide the PDF data, but we don't provide the walk times. We make them calculate that. I'm not 100% sure why. We have a traffic section in the city here that looks after the operational stuff in that regard. But yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible to provide this information to the consultants so that that review time is lessened or isn't as challenging.
Okay, last call for questions, and feel free to raise your hand if you prefer to unmute and speak your question. Okay, Andrew has a follow-up. Was there a lot of internal resistance on the guideline changes? Old school thinking or different departments having different evaluation requirements, such as delay versus capacity, level of service, traffic operations?
It's a good question. Not really. We have the benefit, like I said before, we're a very small group. Like at the time and when we developed these, there was myself and there was one other individual. For the most part, the discussions we've had with our traffic folks have been really good. They've got a similar philosophy in that, again, like I said before, one of the issues we have in Red Deer is we're very small, and we don't really have a good sense of what delay is compared to, say, Edmonton, or like I can't imagine some of the cities out east, right? So the challenge we have from the community is this notion that a level of service C is the end of the world, and but philosophically, when we talk to our traffic operations people, they're okay with an E. They're okay with an F if it, ultimately is going to lead to either the mode shift or it's going to change people to use another intersection. So we've got some comfort there, to be able to say the Starbucks down at the south end that I gave you guys is a great example, because the south end in Red Deer during the Christmas shopping season is just nuts. And our traffic engineer was down there one day and she made a comment. She said, "It's nuts." Like it's the delay there is crazy, right? But that's okay because it is what it is, and at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. You could be talking about the difference between waiting 2 minutes for your coffee and 3 minutes for your coffee. So we haven't had a ton of resistance there. Our development officers love it, and our developers are really on board with it because it's changed. And we love it. That was the other thing that was interesting, because sometimes these TIAs were just not the funnest thing in the world for us to do. Part of it was our own doing. There was a lot of back and forth. Sometimes there was a lot of time in between, and it's much funner to do one than to review one. And so, that really got, again, it was just the two of us, but it really got us on board because things just got funner.
All right. Well, we'll end there. Thanks so much, Russ. Really appreciate you sharing your insights and experience from Red Deer. And thank you to everyone on the call for participating today. And stay tuned for more events coming from National Capital Section. Have a great day, everyone.